Chapter 2. Jake slammed his fist down on the steering wheel. Frustration rode him hard and his jaw ached from the constant clench of his teeth. For the last hour of his trip to Chicago, he'd been barely inching forward, choked by frantic traffic. The I-88 had been relatively free-flowing until he took the exit onto I-290, where the exodus from the city was attempting to take over all 8 lanes of the highway. Every radio station was staticky white noise, or on a pre-recorded loop advising listeners they were in a state of emergency and to remain indoors. But Jake didn't need a news anchor to tell him things were bad. Really bad. As he got closer to the city, nothing looked amiss, until you noticed the enormous plumes of black smoke clouding the sky to the north. And once you saw that, you couldn't unsee it. Whatever the fuck it wasn't good. Jake had been in his mechanic shop that morning, fitting a throttle valve into a carburetor when his sister Chloe arrived, the rear tires on her car kicking up gravel. "The way you drive, I'm going to need to change the brake pads on that vehicle soon," he said, wiping grease-stained hands on his jeans. "Are you not listening to the radio?" she screeched. "Whoa! What's going on? Calm down." "Calm down? Don't tell me to calm down. The world is freaking ending. I'm not going to calm down." "Did you have a fight with Ash? I thought he was out of town." "Yes, he's out of town. And the jerk wouldn't listen to me this morning when I begged him to come back." Chloe was literally wringing her hands in distress. "How exactly is the world ending, Chloe?" "The WHO has declared a pandemic. Psi-V is in the States." "The WHO? World Health Organization?" Chloe almost yelled. "They're saying the rate of community transmission is so fast that containment is basically impossible. Schools are closing and Twitter is exploding with reports of the military mobilizing." She was breathless with agitation. "You need to get Mac." Jake was already moving toward his SUV before Chloe finished speaking, his mind set on one thing: to rescue Mackenzie. Hell, she was one of the few things he'd thought about since he was 14. "I'll call Mac and tell her I'm on my way. You call that damn husband of yours and tell him to get home." "I can't get through to Ash. I just keep getting a busy signal." "Keep trying. I'll message you when I get to Mac." Since then, he'd tried several times to send messages to both Chloe and Mackenzie, letting them know he was delayed. Each time, the messages bounced back unsent, and his calls wouldn't connect. He was now almost 2 hours late to meet with Mackenzie. Worry gnawed at his stomach, causing bile to rise in his throat. Jake's unrequited love for his sister's best friend meant he knew Mackenzie probably even better than Chloe did. He absorbed every gesture and nuance when he was with her. Hell, he remembered details she'd probably forgotten about herself. He knew she secretly loved One Direction, and that she couldn't stand cooked tomatoes, that she bit her bottom lip when she was nervous, and it was her deadbeat father, and the fact he owed money to half the town, that had driven her from Sanford. He also knew, with dreadful clarity, she would not be prepared for whatever was coming. Grams had always said Mackenzie was book smart, not street smart. It didn't matter how many hundreds of hours that girl had spent studying to be a lawyer. She needed protecting. The urge to get to her now had his foot pressing on the accelerator. The front corner of his vehicle nudged the car, blocking him. Heading in the opposite direction, he could see the despair in the heavy frown lines of the man driving it. "Move over," Jake gestured to him. They locked eyes, and Jake saw when the man decided to help. With no acknowledgement, his beefy arm went over the headrest of the passenger seat as he turned to look backward, looking for a gap in the next lane to move into. In this manner, appealing to each oncoming driver's humanity, Jake moved forward until suddenly he was behind a garbage truck that was forging ahead, heedless of the oncoming vehicles. Sitting on the truck's tail, Jake was lightheaded with relief that he was finally making progress. In the end, he had to park several streets from Mackenzie's Lincoln Park apartment because the roads were clogged with stalled or abandoned cars. There were fewer people on the sidewalk than he would have expected, and those he saw were covering their mouths and noses with articles of clothing. Smart. Shrugging out of his shirt, he held it over his face and started a steady jog to Mackenzie. After hours of sitting tensely in his vehicle, it was liberating to stretch and morph his worry into physical action. The entrance to the apartment building was open, and Jake bounded the steps to the second floor, stopping short of crashing into Mackenzie's door. Knocking sharply, he breathed deeply to calm his racing heart. "Mac?" he called, knocking harder. No response. "Damn it, Mackenzie, are you there?" Dread threatened to swallow him. Without stopping to think, he rammed the door with his shoulder, attempting to force his way through. Standing back, he rubbed at his now throbbing shoulder. Too bad he'd never learned how to pick a lock. "Damn it, Mac, are you there?" Bracing his bent elbows against the wall, he rested his bowed head. The unfamiliar creep of defeat was bitter. Jake hadn't allowed himself to think beyond getting to Mackenzie, and now he was here, and she wasn't. He had no idea what route she'd take to get home from her office, whether she'd take a bus or the L. If he went out looking for her, he may miss her. "Jake?" The small voice came from behind, and before he could turn, Mackenzie had thrown herself at his back, wrapping her arms tight around his waist. Grinning stupidly, he turned and pulled her into his arms, relief exploding in his chest. His smile widened as she burrowed against his bare chest, her voice muffled. "Gross, Jake. You smell." "Where have you been? I thought you'd be here waiting for me." She pulled back, and he looked at her properly. Her blouse was untucked, her hair a mess, and her bare feet were grubby and bloody with blisters. "Jesus, Mac! What happened? What happened out there?" he asked, worry lacing his tone. "I ended up having to walk and ditch the heels about halfway. It's crazy, Jake. I saw a bunch of police officers trying to reason with a group of people, and then out of nowhere the army was there and started shooting." She paused, stifling a sob. "They just pulled out guns and opened fire into the crowd." "Fuck," he said. "Come on, open up and let's get you packed. We need to get out of here." "No judgment from you, okay? I didn't know I was going to have visitors, and the place is a mess." She jiggled her key in the lock. "I'm not going to be checking your kitchen sink for dirty dishes, Mac." Turns out that wasn't exactly what Mackenzie was referring to. Living in an apartment with no clothesline or dryer, she'd rigged up several strings along which lacy lingerie was drying. Jake would have paid money, a lot of money, to peruse each delicate piece. Instead, he cleared his throat and forced his gaze away. Now was not the time. "Pack enough for a couple of weeks. We don't know how long this is going to go on for. Do you have spare asthma inhalers?" "Damn, I should have picked up extras at the drugstore this morning. I'll have to do that before we get going. I emptied mine on the way home." Striding to the kitchen, Jake opened the refrigerator and grabbed 2 bottles of water. "Pack cold weather gear," he called out. "You're not my dad," she said, coming into the room as she slung a backpack over her shoulder. She'd changed into sneakers, leggings, and a sweater. "That's all you're taking?" He raised a skeptical eyebrow, ignoring her comment. "I don't know what's going on out there, but when it all blows over, I'm coming back here. It's not like I'll be in Sanford when winter comes. There'll be a vaccine before we know it." "I wouldn't bet on it. Are you sure you've got everything you need?" he asked, passing her the water to put in her backpack. "Yes, Dad." That rankled, knowing Mackenzie's feelings toward her father. Having pulled his shirt back on, he grabbed 2 dish towels from the drawer, telling her they were to use as face masks. "How did you know which drawer they were in?" "Dish towels go in the 3rd drawer down. Everyone knows that." "You're such a know-it-all," she said. "A know-it-all who's here to save your ass. Let's go." "I don't need saving." "Sure, Mac." "Save the towels. I've got proper face masks." She handed him one. "And I'm glad you're here," she admitted quietly, pulling the front door closed behind them. He hid a smile, but it slipped as they started down the stairs. If the military was massacring in the streets, he didn't think the situation was going to be blowing over soon.